ISO 27001, Clause 4, Context of Organization explained simply. So in this video, we're going to go through ISO 27001, Clause 4. There are chapters at the bottom that take you to each of the sub-clauses. So be sure to check those out. You can fast track to each of the individual areas that we're going to be going through. But Clause 4 explains simply, what are we looking at here when it comes to context of organization? This is about understanding about who we are as we start to move towards our first steps and our first forays into this ISO 27001 implementation. What we're going to be looking at here is we're going to be looking at internal issues. We're going to be looking at external issues. These are the risks both internally and externally to our information security management system that could prevent it from being successful and meeting its stated as an intended goals. What we're also going to be looking at here are the needs and interests of interested parties. Interested parties are people that are interested in and have a vested interest in the information security management system. These are people that have things that they need it to do. They have things that they want it to not do. So we're going to go through and identify, and we're going to look at the needs of interested parties. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the scope of our information security management system, taking into account our internal and external issues, the needs of our interested parties. We're going to define the scope, and we're going to look in a lot more detail. Click the link, follow straight to the chapter. We're going to look at the scope of the information security management system. Then what we're going to look at is the information security management system itself. What is an information security management system? What are the mandatory documents that make it up? How does an information security management system hang together? So ISO 27001 Clause 4, Context of Organization, broken down into the 4 sub-clauses that you're going to see in the chapters below, so you can fast forward and work out how you're going to implement them in the easiest, most efficient way possible. We've got ISO 27001 Clause 4.1, understanding the organization in its context, a little bit about who we are, an overview of who we are, understanding what our business objectives are, understanding what it is that we are trying to achieve. We've got ISO 27001 Clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Here we're going to be looking at those people like our stakeholders, like our staff, like our customers, like our regulator, and understanding what it is that they need to see from the management system, and then showing how our information and security management system meets their requirements. Then we're looking at determining the scope, ISO 27001 Clause 4.3, determining the scope of the information security management system. Looking at what is it that's in scope when it comes to our certification, understanding that we only have limited resources in time and people, and that there is a rigor and a bureaucracy associated with the standard. Making sure that our scope is defined in such a way that it meets the requirements of our customers and our clients, so that they can get maximum value when we show them the certificate, and maximum assurances that we are doing the right thing for information security for the things that are purchasing from us. And then below we have ISO 27001 Clause 4.4, the information security management system, going into the nuts and bolts about what is that information security management system and how does it hang together. So stick with me as we go through them in sequence. Click below, fast forward. But that was ISO 27001 Clause 4, Context of Organization, explained simply. And now we're going to take a deep dive as we go through those implementation steps. So 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. What is this all about? Specifically, this is about what they call internal and external issues, right? So there are internal and external issues. That's what 4.1 is. What are internal and external issues? These are, you could use the terminology risks, right? But they relate specifically to your information security management system and your ability to operate an effective information security management system. So what are we looking at? We're looking at internal issues that might stop us from achieving our objectives, external issues, and we're looking at some of the requirements around that, which we'll come on to on a later blog. So if I look at the purpose, I am doing a little bit of reading off of the back of here. As I say, a link to the blog is in the bottom. So the purpose is to make sure you have considered the risks to your information security management system, and that you're managing them effectively, right? We want a management system that is highly effective. We want to understand what the risks are so that we can mitigate those. If I give you a definition, and this is a reading piece because I do this for all of the clauses that we have. So the ISO 27001 standard defines clause 4.1 as the organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and that affects its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its information security management system. So yes, this is the 2022 version of the standard, and that is the word for word definition. So the requirement of the standard, as we say, is to identify what they are and mitigate them. What I need you to remember as we come back to this and we go through these, ISO 27001 as a standard is only 14 pages long, right? It doesn't give you much more than that, than the words I've just read out to you. But through decades of experience, I'm going to show you how you can implement that and what the audit is going to look for. The Annex A controls are separate. They have their own blogs. For right now, what we're doing is we're going through the 27001 clauses. There are a series of templates, right? I have released the ISO 27001 toolkit onto the market. Over 4,000 people globally, which continues to shock me, have used my approach, my videos, my templates, my toolkit to successfully achieve ISO 27001 certification. And within that, there are specific templates around the context of organization, including internal and external issues, ones that come up time and time again, pre-written, pre-populated and ready to go, right? And it gives you guidance on how you can consider those and adopt those and build upon them. But worst case scenario, you could just download it and off you are and off you're going, right? So what are internal issues? Let's have a look at a couple of examples of what internal issues could be. Again, these are common, right? These come up time and time with every client engagement over the years. Internal issues could be things like people, it could be things like time, it could be organizational structure, it could be the technologies that you've got, the availability of reliable, qualified and experienced resources to be able to help you to run it, and it could be internal issues around the company objectives if they don't align with your information security objectives. Okay, so let me give you some guidance. When we are writing our internal and our external issues, what we're going to do is we're going to list out what those issues are, and we're going to record within our context of organization document positives and negatives, right? So what we're going to say is, let's give some examples. We said people. One example where people could be an internal issue is internally there are no resources trained or experienced in the delivery of ISO 27001. So that comes up time and time again, right? So that would be a negative note associated with that internal issue. If we have a negative note associated with an internal issue, what we're going to do is we are going to have a risk register item, right? So we're going to manage it through risk management. We're going to show what our mitigation plan is. We're going to show what it is that we're going to be doing about it moving forward and how we're going to address that. But here is a top tip, right? ISO 27001 Ninja top tip. My top tip is if there is a positive to the identified issue, the potential issue, then write the positive. So the positive to people could be internally there are people trained and there are people experienced in the delivery of ISO 27001, right? Is it on the risk register? No. Why would I give you the top tip to record positive and negative? The reason that I do it is when it comes to going for our certification audit, and I say this time and time again, play the auditor, not the standard, right? Every auditor is different. Everybody approaches it differently. Every auditor has an opinion. And over the years, the internal issues and external issues that I am giving you are ones that have come up, right? If you haven't documented it for 27001, if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist, right? If you have not documented it, it doesn't exist. And what an auditor will like to do is try and catch you out, right? So they'll say, well, did you not consider people as an internal issue? So if it was a positive and you hadn't recorded it, you're going to look a bit on the back foot, right? Like you're saying, oh yeah, of course we did. But what we like to do is say, no, we've considered all of these internal issues, positive or negative, and we have recorded against them our position as an organization, right? So it's just about smoothing that audit process through. It's about helping that auditor, giving them as much information as we can so that they can make an effective judgment against us and whether our information security management system is working or not. Let's have a look at a couple of fast examples. Time, what could issues with time? Time could be that you haven't got enough time to dedicate to the management system. You know, the organization is working too much on commercial products, positive and negative. You do have time, you don't have time. Organizational structures could be an issue for you. It could be that you're part of a group structure. It could be a part of an international structure, or it could be more micro than that, but those organizational structures could present you with some challenges around meeting your objectives. Again, if they don't, put the positive down, right? We have considered it and it is not an issue for us. Technologies that you use may potentially prevent or introduce a risk, an issue for you. If you're using bleeding edge technologies or the way that you're using it. So you can see that. Go to the blog, the table is on there, the examples are on there, the template is on there, you can download it, it's all fully populated and it's all included. So let's have a little look at what external issues are, right? External issues are external risks to our information security management system, right? So these are things that are outside of your internal organization that you have considered that could impact your information security management system. So what could examples of that be? Well, the economic climate could be one, technological advances, competition, legislation changes and relationships with external stakeholders. There are more, right? These are just examples that I'm giving you that could be external issues that affect you. And again, this is because we've been asked by auditors. Not every auditor asks the same question. Every auditor is different. But if we cover all of their requirements, right, when they do pop up, at least we've got them and we're in our best place. So the economic climate, right, during a pandemic, you know, the availability of resources, the availability of finances could be impeded. That could impact us, and therefore we would want a risk register and a risk item and to manage that through risk. Or it could be that the economic climate is actually positive and is affecting us in a positive way to deliver our management system, and therefore it doesn't need a risk, but we're just going to record it. Technological advances as well. If you're working in an area of, say, bleeding edge technology, that could be something that's going to come down. Or you're relying on technologies, right, that are going to be superseded, out of date, out of support. It's a long time since I touched technology, but if I imagine like Windows XP, Windows 12, whatever it used to be, you know, I hear people talking these numbers and letters and saying, you know, this is going out of support on this date. If your entire infrastructure is built around it, then you've got a problem. You need to manage it and you need a risk on there. Competition is on there, right? Why is competition on there? I've had a couple of auditors over the decades that have approached me on this. And again, just for consideration, right? Competition actually could affect your information security management system due to them being a competitor, i.e., you know, they're seeking your intellectual property, they are a threat vector towards you, or they want your staff, right? You know, and your ability then to deliver against your objectives for information security is going to be severely hindered. So how do I comply? How do I comply with this standard? You write your context of organization document. You can download the template. It's written for you. It's got a guide. It's got a video. It's got everything you need. Or you could write your own. You identify and record your internal issues. You identify and record your external issues. You decide if those issues require a risk management. And if they do, you put them on your risk register and you follow your internal risk management process, right? So what is an audit going to check? When an auditor comes to you, what kind of things are they going to check? Well, they're going to check for a start that you have documented your internal and external issues, right? So the simplest way of doing that is to use the context of organization document, download the template, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to make sure that you've documented it. As a rule, if it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. The more you document, the easier your audit will be, the smoother the process is going to be. The next thing that they're going to check is that you are risk managing those internal and external issues, right? So if that internal and external issue is a negative, then they're going to be checking that you are managing it, right? Not just that you've recorded it and gone, meh. What they want to see is that it's on the risk register, that you've either accepted the risk, they're going to see what the existing control was, what the future control was. They're going to look at your risk scoring. They'll look at minutes of meetings to make sure that you've discussed it. They have to tie together, right? Your issues have to tie with your risk management. And that you have approved and included common issues, right? So I've said above, I've given you some common examples, but they're going to look for them, right? These auditors share knowledge amongst themselves. They like to look for these things. So they're the things that an auditor is going to check. What are the top 3 mistakes that people make, right? Well, the top 3 mistakes are, number 1 is you have no evidence that anything happened, right? So you need to keep records of everything, minutes of meetings, records of what you did, as a bare minimum, that document that lists out what your internal and external issues are. Some of the certification bodies will say you don't need to write it down, right? Technically, maybe you don't. But if we do, the benefit to us is we are going to make that process of audit so smooth and so easy, giving and hand feeding that auditor, right? It's just going to make our life easier. Plus it gives future knowledge for staff turnover, new people coming, etc. The biggest mistake, the number 2 biggest mistake that people make, is not linking it to risk management. We've discussed that in depth. And the third biggest mistake, which I cover on all of the videos, is your documentation and version control is wrong. It's a housekeeping element. It's not specific to this one particular clause. Does your version control look right? Has it been reviewed within the last 12 months? Is there an owner? Is there a classification? Is there a version control? Does everything mirror up? Does it look right? Does it pass the sniff test as well as meeting the documentation standard and there's documentation requirements? Get your documentation on point. Auditors love to say, oh, you called it 6.1 here, but here you called it 6.2. Or the last review date is 13 months ago and you say you do it every 12. Get everything refreshed. Oh, this name, Bob Jones, is a document owner, but you told me in the HR audit that Bob Jones has left. Oh, should have put a role in, right, rather than a name. So they're going to check on that. Why is it important? It's important for us because we need to understand whether or not our management system is going to be effective, right? And we want to give it the best chance that we can give it. And the way that we're going to do that is spending time to identify any risks that could impact it. Now, there is a process of continual improvement built into ISO 27001 that's going to continually improve this management system. Internal audits, incidents, management review meetings, blah, blah, blah. We will come to those clauses. But we need to make sure that we've documented that. We need to make sure that we've understood that and given our fledgling information security management system a fighting chance before it gets off the ground, right? Who is responsible for this clause? Responsibility for 4.1 lies with senior management, right? Now, they will probably delegate the doing to the information security manager. If you're unlucky, maybe somebody in IT. But the responsibility, the accountability, the buck stops with senior management. And that is going to be the same with the majority of the clauses, right? But in fact, all of the clauses, because it's a leadership top-down standard. So we've got a couple of common FAQs in there. I'm not going to go through those. I've taken up enough time on the video. On the blog, which I'm going to link below within the YouTube, all of those FAQs are on there. There's lists of those, all of the tables, all of the examples that I've given you. So ISO 27001 clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So we're going to take a deep dive, see what the standard is looking for, see how to implement it, look at a couple of common gotchas, things that people get wrong, what an auditor is going to look for, how you can fully satisfy that standard. So what are the needs and expectations of interested parties? If you've ever in traditional business projects done a stakeholder analysis, it's pretty much that, right? So what we're looking at is who might have an interest in our information security management system, who might have an interest in the outcomes of that management system, and what are their interests? What is it that they want to see from it? What are their goals? What are their objectives for it? Now, there is a common list of interested parties, right? They come up time and time again. It won't come as a surprise to you to realize that I have a template, an ISO 27001 template that covers it, pre-populated, fully populated, pre-written and ready to go. And it sets out what those needs and expectations are per interested party. But if you were going to go through it, you're going to think about what the interested parties could be, both internally and externally to you. So let's have a think. Who could have an interest in our information security management system? Well, senior leadership, the board, our shareholders, they're all going to have an interest in our management system, whether or not it's mitigating risk, whether or not it's consuming resources. We're going to have our staff are going to have an interest in it, our clients, our customers, potentially our competitors. So there's a whole list of people that are in there. And as I say, they're already in that template for you. But let's have a little look at some of the detail that goes with it. And as always, I end up reading a little bit. But let's have a look at some of the details. So the purpose, what is the purpose of clause 4.2? So the purpose is to make sure that you have considered people, their requirements, and also how you're going to address those requirements through information security. So we've got to tie our information security back to their requirements. What is a definition? So the ISO 27001 standard defines ISO 27001 clause 4.2 as the organization shall determine interested parties that are relevant to the information security management system. It shall determine the requirements of those interested parties. And this is relatively, well, it is new, which of these requirements will be addressed through the information security management system. So ISO 27001 clause 4.2, the requirement, it, as you would expect, it is actually part of clause 4, context of organization. I have included it in the context of organization document. It's in that same document. And it's broken down into identifying internal and external issues as well as the needs of the interested parties. When it comes to implementing that, how would I identify interested parties? Well, interested parties is just another way of saying stakeholders. We've already touched on that, right? So you could do a traditional stakeholder analysis. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve from this. If you want to do it more formally, you could just get people in a room, right? You could brainstorm it, spitball it, or you could take the context of organization template that I've already done for you, download it, reuse it, follow the guide on how to tweak it and adapt it for you. So lots of different ways, right? Once we have identified who they are, how are we going to identify their requirements? We could ask them. You know, I mean, that's probably the most simplest way. We could ask them, or again, using the template, you know, I give you guides on that. Now, there is a blog that goes along with this video, so I'll link to it below in the YouTube. In that blog, I set out all of the details. I give you a table of all of the interested parties and all of their requirements, and I show you exactly how to do it. But if I give you some examples, so the kind of requirements that people are going to have on an information security management system are that it meets our legal and regulatory requirements, that it avoids or contributes to the avoidance of a data breach, right? That it reduces our number of incidents, that it helps us to avoid legal and regulatory fines, that it gives us a commercial advantage for tenders, and that it gives us a commercial advantage when it comes to sales, and that it protects our company reputation, that it provides a work environment that is safe, right? That it allows people to conduct their role with undue bureaucracy, that it is providing us the ability to cooperate with external investigations if they come up in a timely and an efficient manner. So there are lots of different requirements. All of them are listed. The basic principle is do a stakeholder analysis, ask the people in the room who might have an interest in this, identify what their interest may be, document that, and then be able to tie that back to your information security management system. Now, the approach I'm taking currently is not to write down how the management system directly reflects their needs, because by its very existence it does, right? So what I would do come the audit is I would verbalize and I would provide a narrative around what it is that I have done and how that links directly back to those requirements. So what is an auditor going to look for? An auditor is going to look for that you have documented the interested parties, right? If it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. They're going to look for how you address those requirements, and again, that you can link those requirements back to the ISMS. What are the top 3 mistakes that people make? The top 3 mistakes are that you have no evidence of anything that happened. What do I mean by that? As a bare minimum, you need that list of interested parties and requirements. You know, if you can evidence that meetings were held and you've got meeting minutes where you discussed it, if you can provide ancillary documentation in terms of stakeholder analyses or whatever it may be, then all the good. You don't have to do that, right? But that is going to add some additional weight when it comes to the audit. They're going to look and see, you know, a top mistake might be that you didn't link it to your ISMS, right? So you just chucked a bunch of requirements down, but none of them are actually specific or addressed by the ISMS. It's apparent if you take the list that I've got, right? You know, reduction of legal and regulatory breaches, data breaches, you can see and you can narrate and discuss exactly how that would tie back. And the third mistake that people make, it's the common one that comes up time and time again, your documentation is wrong, your housekeeping is wrong. So again, I'm going to stop going through these, but for now, as you're following them in order, you know, version control in the header, in the footer, wherever you use the version control should all match up. There should be a version control table, there should be a last reviewed date, there should be a document owner, there should be information documentation classification. All of that housekeeping, oftentimes we see is wrong, and that's going to catch you out. Who is responsible for ISO 27001 clause 4.2? As always, senior leadership, right? It is a leadership top-down standard. The reality of the delivery of that is probably going to be the information security manager, or worst case, somebody in IT. And then FAQs, right? There's a bunch of FAQs on the blog. I'm not going to go through them in the video. If you want to see the blog, click the link below. But that is ISO 27001 interested parties summary. Who is interested? Who has a vested interest in the outcome of it? Whose resources are you consuming? Whose money are you spending? Whose problems are you solving? List them. What are the requirements that they have? List them, and then be able to tie that back to your information security management system. ISO 27001 clause 4.3, determining the scope of the ISMS, determining the scope of the information security management system. We're going to take a deep dive. We're going to look at what the requirements of the standard are. We're going to look at how you can implement it. We're going to look at what auditors are going to look for. We're going to look at the common mistakes that you make. We're going to make sure that you are 100% successful when it comes to your delivery of ISO 27001 4.3, determining the scope of the information security management system. So let's take a deep dive straight in. On my blog, on hightable.io, on my website, there is a menu item. Go along the menu item to learn, click drop down. In there you are going to see blogs, guides to every single clause. You're going to see guides to every single Annex A control. You're going to see a lot of detailed information, all of it for free. Everything I do, I give away for free. On there, I've done a number of different blogs on how to define scope and how to implement scope. And I'll make a link to those and to the specific blog on this control below in the YouTube video. So let's look at how do we determine scope. When it comes to determining the scope of the information security management system, what we have to do is we have to understand what it is that our customers and our clients are wanting from us, right? It is rare that you would determine the scope of your information security management for certification to be the entirety of your organization, right? It is good practice to apply the ISMS to your whole organization, but when it comes to certification, we're going to narrow that down. A couple of reasons why we want to do that. We only have limited resources, we have limited time, we have limited money, we have limited people. And it is quite a bureaucratic, documentation heavy standard, right? So the more things we include in it, the more work, the more hoops that we're going to have to jump through. Also, what we want to do is we want to create an output that is of value to the people that are asking us for it, right? So when people ask us for a 27001 certificate, they're specifically asking for it because they want assurances that we are doing the right thing for information security in relation to the products and services that they are buying from us. Okay, so it is pointless if we are a SaaS online platform delivering payroll, HR, whatever it may be, finance systems, whatever, and we have a 27001 certificate for our stationery cupboard, right? That's not going to cut the mustard, right? So when we determine our scope, the way that we go about it, first of all, is we look at the products and services that we have, and then we look at what it is that our customers are asking for us. So that can be by asking them, what is it that you think we should be certified for? 9 times out of 10, they've already told you though, and that's the reason that you're here, and that's the reason that you're going for your 27001 certificate. And you can also look at your contracts. What are the contracts that you have in place with your customers? What are the products and services that they have, and what are they buying from you? And any of those contracts that you've got stipulating that you need 27001, and for what? So we're going to go about defining what our 27001 is. If we look at the purpose of this particular clause, the purpose of this clause is to make sure that you have considered and defined the scope of your information security management system in line with the requirements of the standard. I add on the caveat, and the requirements of your customers and clients, right? Because I think that's slightly more important than the standard. I'm going to do a little bit of reading as always, because what I want to do here is give you the definition. So the book definition, ISO 27001 standard defines ISO 27001 clause 4.3 as the organization shall determine the boundaries and the applicability of the information security management system to establish its scope. When Determining that scope, the organization shall consider. Now, in previous blogs, we've covered these, and in previous videos, we've covered these, but we have to consider when defining our scope, internal and external issues. Those internal and external issues that we defined and we went through in clause 4.1, they're going to be important. We have to make sure that we take those into consideration defining scope. We also have to take into consideration the requirements of interested parties. So you remember in a previous video and in the previous blog, we looked at 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So we need to make sure that they are referenced and understood when it comes to defining our scope. Within our scope as well, we draw a box around the thing, right? Whatever it is that we're certifying, we draw a virtual box, an imaginary box, and we create our boundary. But what we also need to do is understand and document the interfaces and dependencies between our activities and those of a third party, right? So that could be where are the infrastructural boundaries, where are the process boundaries, the technical virtual boundaries. We need to understand and define the interfaces and interdependencies between us and other people. So we can see that a lot of the work that we've done already has led us here, right? Each of the clauses that we go through, each of the videos that we go through is going to build upon the previous one and move us forward along that journey, right? So if we look at 4.3, what is the requirement? The clause forms part of the overall ISO 27001 clause 4 context of organization. This context of organization, high level clause 4, that's looking at who we are. Do we know what our boundaries are? Do we know who our interested parties are? Do we know what the issues are, the internal, the external issues? This forms part of clause 4, the context of the organization. What we're going to do is we can implement this through templates, right? Have I released the ultimate ISO 27001 toolkit onto the market? Of course I have. The most aggressively cost-effective, the most ruthlessly efficient toolkit on the market today. Absolutely I have. And totally unique in the marketplace, I also released individual templates. For a ridiculously low cost, you can actually download individual templates, for which there is one for this. Right, so there is a scope template with examples already in it, already laid out and structured in a way with a guide and a specific implementation video that goes with it. So be sure to check out hightable.io, find that template, and it's going to help you in this clause no end. If you're not going to go ahead and get the template, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. Let me give you the steps that you're going to go through to define your scope. So number one, you are going to list your products and services, right? List out all of the products and services that you deliver and as your customer would know them. So here I want everything. I want everything on a board, right? Then ask your customer and clients which products and services they would expect to be 27001 certified. This can be straightforward, right? You may already have been asked, you may already have a definition, but let's take that list of all of the things that you do and work out which are the ones that it is that your clients require you to be certified for. As a rule, it tends to be one or two, right? It's probably going to be one of your major services or products. Then what I need you to do and what you are going to do is step 3 is you're going to implement your documentation, right? So you're going to document your scope. So formally document your scope. As part of documenting your scope, again within the template, best practice for me is to include everything that's in scope and everything that's out of scope. So as I said at the beginning, it may well be that your information security management system applies to your entire organization. That's fine, it makes sense. But for certification scope, what we want to do is define what's in and what's out. We want to be crystal clear in our understanding of what it is that we are actually certifying against. There are layers of documentation that I would expect to see within that definition of scope that support our scope. The first one is the high-level scope statement, right? The 27001 scope statement is the statement that goes on your ISO 27001 certificate. It's probably the first question that you're going to be asked by the certification body when you go to book your certification audit, right? What is your scope statement? So getting that right, getting that crafted is absolutely fundamental and key. What I would then say, and if I was working with client, was let's build up some additional documentation around that. In scope, out of scope people, in scope, out of scope technologies, networks, locations. So let's work through what it is that we have and work out what is in and what is out of scope. I would include in there documentation, right? I would expect to see architectural diagrams and documentation to a level that's appropriate to you, but increasing in detail through a series of documentation steps. What does that sound? That sounds like, okay, what does that mean to you? What that means is high level, you're going to have an architecture diagram, right? Super high level. It could be blobs, it could be squares that lays out the products and services that you've got. Underneath that, you're going to start to break that down. You're going to break that down maybe into a server diagram, virtual server diagram, physical server diagram. It's going to show where you've got your primary servers, your data stores, your databases. Underneath that, I would expect to see a network diagram. How is your network layered? How does your network lay out? What are the interdependencies between your networks? By creating that level of documentation that you should have already, you can start to draw your virtual boundary around the things that are in and the things that are out. What I'm going to do then is, once I've got all of that in place, I'm going to review it and I'm going to approve it. What do I mean by that? I mean, I'm going to take that to the management review meeting, or the structure that approves and signs off documentation. We will get to the management review meeting in another video and the mechanism, but we are going to review it. We're going to have a body within our organization review it and approve it and formally document that we have approved it. Do I have an example of a 27001 scope statement? Of course I do, right? 27001 hightable.io are UCAS accredited, so we've been through that formal process, and on our 27001 certificate, let me read for you what our certification statement is. Information Security Consultancy and Virtual Chief Information Security Officer Services in accordance with the Statement of Applicability version 1.2. So what you can see here is that it's quite a very succinct scope statement, right? It's what goes on the certificate, and it lays out exactly what it is that we provide and that I provide, and it makes reference to the thing called the Statement of Applicability and its current version. We're going to do another video. We're going to come to the Statement of Applicability, so don't worry about that for now. Just know that on my website, you have in this blog, which I'm going to link below, example statements, right? Examples that you can use, that you can take, that you can adapt, and that you can craft. So I've done some of the hard work for you. How do I pass an audit? To pass an audit, you're going to implement the what, right? You're going to implement what I've just said. Once you've implemented that, you're going to conduct an internal audit. You're going to pass your own internal audit, and then you're going to go for certification. When you go for your certification, your auditor is going to check a number of different things, but high level, let's look at three things that an auditor will look for in terms of this particular clause. They're going to look for whether or not you've documented your scope. All right, it's all well and good having a scope. 27001 is the standard. If it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. So they're going to check that you have your scope written down, ideally in the template that you've downloaded and used from me, but if not, in a similar format. There's videos and guides on it, so you can copy it if you need to, or fast track by doing the download. Then they're going to want to make sure that you've implemented it and that you've implemented the standard. So they're going to look at the scope, they're going to look at the standard, and they're going to apply the standard to the scope, right? That's the entire purpose of 27001 certification. And then they're going to look that that scope has been approved. So evidence is that you as a group have approved it, not just the IT manager has decided what it is, not just the information security manager has decided what it is, but that you as an organization have followed your internal processes that we are going to define, and that you have approved that scope. Let's look at three mistakes that people make, three common mistakes that people make when it comes to scope. I'm not going to surprise you. One is you got your scope wrong, right? Getting your scope wrong is absolutely devastating, right? I say it's devastating because the amount of cost, time, and effort that you are going to go through to do something you didn't need to do is going to be absolutely phenomenal. It is important in the early stages to get that scope right, narrow down that focus and narrow down those resources. I say again, it may well be that you apply the management system to the entire organization, but the rigor required for 27001 can be quite high, right? So you want to get that scope right. The second mistake that people make is they scope it, but they didn't scope it based on client need. They didn't listen. They didn't listen to the client, right? They picked a scope that they thought would be easy for them. Now, if you get the scope wrong in the eyes of the client, the certificate becomes useless and pointless, right? They are using the certificate specifically to look at you and gain assurances that you are doing the right thing. If you can't offer them a certificate that says what it is that they bought from you and gives them assurances that that is being covered by information security management, then you might as well not give them anything. So you want to make sure that you're scoping to client need. Don't get it wrong, scope to client need. And the third one is that your document and version control is wrong, and that's about documentation housekeeping, which I've covered many times and I'm not going to cover again on here. So when it comes to the responsibility, who is responsible when it comes to the getting the scope right? Senior management and leadership. 27001 is a top-down standard. It shows about leadership demonstrating that they are leading. Their buck stops with them ultimately, right? So you want to get that accountability written into your management system. They're accountable for it. The actual doing is probably going to land with the information security manager and the IT manager, typically, whether that's all right or wrong, but that's where that's going to land. So in terms of FAQs, in terms of guides, in terms of more detailed examples on scope statements, hightable.io, click learn, drop down, go to either the blog or the Annex A control reference guide. Everything that you need is on there. All of that information is for free. I'm not going to work through those with you now. I don't want to take up your valuable time. But that was an insight into scope. Get your scope right. Listen to your client. Don't get it wrong. Document it. Take into consideration your internal and external issues, the needs of your interested parties, and be able to show through documentation the boundaries and interdependencies with third parties, and you are going to be absolutely golden. So clause 4.4, the information security management system, I'm going to start off with a little bit of reading, because what I want to do is I want to give you the book definition. So we'll start with the book definition, right? The book definition is: the organization shall establish, implement, maintain and continually improve an information security management system, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirements of this document. That is ISO 27001, the 2022 version of clause 4.4, the information security management system. So there's a lot of words in there, right? Bit of a recursive definition. What is an information security management system? Have an information security management system. Nice and easy. So basically, what are we looking at? 27001 is a risk-based system. It's a system based on understanding what the risks are to you and your organization, and then implementing controls to mitigate those risks. But the management system element itself is about how you organize yourself, how you manage, and how you deliver the information security management. When it comes to the standard itself, I know people get a little bit twitchy about it, and lots of people make a lot of money off of the back of it, but the standard itself is actually only 10 pages of valuable content, right? It's only 10 pages. And when it comes to this particular clause, that's it. That's the entirety of the guidance you get, right? But obviously we've been through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of audits, and we've done hundreds of implementations, so we know exactly what you need. The fastest way for you to develop and implement a 27001 information security management system clearly is going to be to purchase and acquire the ISO 27001 toolkit. It is the most aggressively priced, right? Technically, I think it's one of the, in fact, the cheapest commercially available toolkit on the market today. It is ruthlessly effective, right? Over 4,000 people have used the toolkit and my process and my methodology to get themselves 27001 certified, and no one, not one of them, has failed yet, right? It is lightweight. It is designed for small business. It is designed to remove bureaucracy but give you what you need. That's the sales pitch, right? But there are different ways of going about it. To develop an information security management system, you could, and you should, buy a copy of the standard, but you could purchase a copy of the standard and look at all of the clauses that make up the standard, and then from that try and work out what the documentation is that you require, then create that documentation. That's an approach. You could buy the toolkit, we've just said that, which is the easiest and the fastest approach. You could engage with a consultant. A consultant for a build and implement of a management system is going to be around about the £10,000 to £15,000 mark. The great thing about a consultant is many of them now use my toolkit. I have a consultant version of it. So they use that and implement that on you. So you could just purchase it yourself, right? But anyway, it is what it is. Or another option is you could buy one of these online SaaS management system platforms, right? And there are many out there. Benefits of an online management system platform, can't really think of any. I'll do another blog on those on another day, and the typical cost around those is going to be anywhere between £10,000 to £40,000 a year. Licensing, training, documentation within their format, etc. But you could, right? And many people do, and many people are successful with them. So you've got 4 routes about how you can build your your information security management system. What is a management system fundamentally made up of? Fundamentally, it is made up of policies. So policies are statements about what you do. It's made up of processes. Processes are the statements of how you do it. It's made up of the management roles and responsibilities. It's about having leadership buy-in, and it's about having various processes that are specific to how you run a management system. What do I mean by that? So, for example, having that process of continual improvement, right? You need an information security management system that is continually improved. So it is made up of documents. Do you need to have something complicated? No, you don't. You know, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, perfectly fine. If you have tools already, such as Confluence and SharePoint, perfectly fine. Use of tools like Jira and Monday, perfectly fine, right? I mean, you can reuse what you've got. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, or as I say, you can buy some of these online platforms if that's the route that you want to go down. So an ISMS, its actual purpose is to ensure that you are managing information security, but by having it documented, you're going to have maturity of process, right? So you're going to have something that is written down, something that is repeatable, and ideally something that the outcome of running is the same irrespective of who does it, right? So by having that process maturity, you are going to increase your information security management effectiveness. What are the changes? Okay, this is a question. What are the changes to clause 4.4 in the 2022 version of the standard? And to be fair, not a lot. In fact, the entirety of the ISO 27001 2022 update was minimal impact. And there's another blog on that, right? But one of the most significant ones was it changes the word "this standard" to "this document." I don't know why. It removes a couple of ands, it removes a couple of a's. But in terms of this particular clause, it now has an addition on its sentencing that says including the processes needed and their interactions. This has always been the case, and we've always done that, but the reason that it does it is to be absolutely clear that processes are included rather than implying it. But in essence, nothing has changed. If you've got a 2013 version of the standard, you're going to be golden, and if you haven't, you're coming to it, it's not adding anything above and beyond what you would have done before. Who is responsible for an information security management system? Our information security management system is the responsibility of senior management and leadership. Senior management and leadership are responsible from leading from the top. This is a standard about top-down leadership. Therefore, the buck ultimately stops with them. When it comes to the implementation of it, ideally you're going to have somebody who does similar to what I do for a living, somebody who is aware of information security management and who is aware of standards. That could be an internal resource, it could be an external resource, a contractor, a consultant, whatever it may be, but it's going to land on them. Typically what we see though is for organizations that don't really understand it and don't really get it, they give it to somebody in IT because they think it's IT related, which it isn't, and then they put all of the emphasis on the IT person to deliver it. And typically then they reach out to me, use my toolkit, use my free 1 hour a week, get involved in my calls, and I help and I support them through it. But accountability and responsibility exists with the leadership. If I was looking at best practices when it comes to our management system, all of these are listed in the blog, right? So make sure you click in the link, have a look at the blog. But best practices around having a management system are understanding business needs, right? We want to make sure our information security management system meets the needs of the business. We're going to write and implement policies. Policies are a fundamental part of that. We're going to train people and ensure that we educate them and implement a culture of information security. We're going to secure devices, and technology. Fundamentally, it's a high-level approach to the controls that we're going to do. We're going to make sure that we put on backups, and we're going to back up a lot. We're going to continually improve, right? Continual improvement is, again, baked into the standard. Our information security management system has to have the ability to continue to improve. And there are a number of steps and processes in future videos that will go through that. And you're going to continually audit. An audit is going to be part of your life, right? The management system has built into it internal audit. So you're continually navel gazing and reviewing yourself and doing your internal audits against the standard 27001 and against the Annex A controls, which is 27002. So you're going to have this process of internal audit ongoing, and you're going to get externally audited a lot, right? I mean, your clients are already, if not already, going to be auditing you, asking you for questions, and if you go for certification, you're going to get through a certification audit. Audit is going to happen a lot. when it comes to the management system and audit, again, you want to design your management system how I have in the toolkit, right? You want to create artifacts that you are asked for on a regular basis, right? So the way that I design my management system is, yes, to manage effectively, but also to answer the questions that I get asked a lot. And you must get these, right? Client, third party, supplier questionnaires are always asking you for similar documentation, irrespective of whether or not you have certification, right? And again, many people believe that by having certification, that's going to be the end to the third party questionnaires and the external audits. It isn't. It isn't, right? Again, you know, you want to get that myth out of your head. Even with certification, they're still going to ask for it. So when you build your management system, build it in a way that is effective and efficient for you to manage, but also for you to respond to third-party questionnaires and to those third-party audits. It's going to make your life so much easier. If I was going to look at 3 mistakes that people make, okay, so what are the top 3 mistakes that people make? In my opinion, buying a portal or a web-based tool. You know, that is my number 1 mistake that I see people make. The tools are fantastic for what they do, for the market that they're aimed at, but they're not for everybody. They are absolutely amazing, right, in terms of their marketing and promising you the world, but whether or not they can actually deliver to your requirement, you know, is going to be based on your individual need. So jumping in straight in to buying a portal is the number 1 mistake that I see. And I get so many people that come back to me, you know, months in going, oh, the cost of licenses is too high. To turn on these features is costing me money. To do this is costing me money. I thought it would do this and it won't do it. You go, no, keep it simple, right? Keep it as simple as you can. Why would you over engineer it for the majority of people? And specifically my audience, you, which tends to be small businesses, right? You don't have 10 to 20 to 30 to 40,000 pound on a tool where you still have all the work to do, right? Why not just do the work and save yourself all that money? The second biggest mistake that I see is doing it yourself with no help at all, right? Again, yes, can you do it yourself? Yes, you can. But why wouldn't you take advantage of very, very low cost resources that are proven to work? Why wouldn't you take advantage of a free 1 hour a week Q&A call with me? Right? You don't have to pay thousands of pounds in consulting. There are resources that are available to you and you are not on your own. You might want to do it yourself. That's not a problem, but you're not on your own. Reach out and consume the resources that are available to you. And the number 3, the third mistake, the biggest mistake when it comes to a management system is giving it to IT to sort out. Right? Fundamental leadership misunderstanding of what it is. They go, oh, this has got to be about antivirus. This has got to be about hacking. It isn't, right? It's such a small element of it. It is a management system. Clause 4.4, a management system, a system of how you manage. It is not a technical standard. It is not a technical checklist. So my biggest mistake, number 3, is going, here, IT, go and deliver that. They look at it and go, this is completely and utterly outside of my wheelhouse. What the hell am I going to do now? And usually that's where they land and they end up with me. So in terms of your management system, clause 4.4, my advice is, I would say, start with something like my toolkit. There are other toolkits available, right? Compare, contrast, look at their pricing, look at their options. I'm not saying definitely buy it. What I am saying is start there and then layer on additional services of help as you need them, right? Identify what the help is that you need rather than going to the most high cost, right, answer that you might not need. Build up slowly, because you will shock yourself and surprise yourself with how easy this is with the right guidance and the right tools for you to deliver it. The blog link below. Be sure, please, to subscribe to my channel. I am incredibly needy. I need supporters. I don't need supporters, I'm teasing. But what I want you to do is I want you to subscribe to the channel, because there is such a wealth of content on here, and I'm going through each of the clauses one by one, showing you how to satisfy it, and I'm going to go through each of the controls as well. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Stuart Barker. I am the ISO 27001 Ninja. This was ISO 27001 Clause 4.4, the Information Security Management System. Until the next blog, peace out.